Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Reading in the Dark. Byron here. This video is going to be a declaration of my ambitious entry into the 2019 BookRiot Read Harder Reading Challenge. If you're not familiar with the Read Harder Reading Challenge, it's been going on for a few years now, and it's basically a list of 24 challenges that are posted every year, which are designed to sort of force you to find books to read that will take you out of your comfort zone and get you to read the kinds of things that maybe you wouldn't normally reach to pick up off the shelf. Rachel Manuel is the creator of the challenge, and from the website on BookRiot where this year's challenges were posted, she said, and I'm going to read this quote to you, she says, "We encourage you to push yourself to take advantage of this challenge as a way to explore topics or formats or genres that you otherwise wouldn't try. But this isn't a test, no one is keeping score, and there are no points to lose. We like books because they allow us to see the world from a new perspective, and sometimes we all need help to even know which perspectives to try out. That's what this is, a perspective shift, but one for which you'll only be accountable to yourself." So I learned about this challenge from Rincey's channel, from Rincey Reads. She actually works for BookRiot in addition to having her BookTube channel, which is how I found out about this whole thing. And I thought it sounded like a great idea. This year I really want to do better in terms of reading authors of color and queer literature, so I have determined to take part in the challenge, and I have even filled out the entire TBR for this challenge. This took a lot of work. This actually took me the last couple of days to do. I started to film a version of this video in which I just found out what the challenges were live while I was filming to try and figure out what I thought I would read while I was finding out what the challenges were, and I very quickly realized this video is trash because I have no idea what to read for any of them, so I had to stop, go back, and spend a day and a half kind of doing some research and figuring out what to read. And a big help to me in that regard was actually the Goodreads group. There's topics posted in the group, a discussion group for every challenge, and people have been going there for some clarification on what some of these mean, so that was very helpful to me. And I don't necessarily think that you are required to do a TBR for this challenge, but I thought if I didn't fill it out right away and know exactly what I had to read at the beginning of the year, it was a really good chance that I would just never fill some of these in, so I filled it in. And as you can see, it is covered with pink highlighting. So the things that are highlighted in pink are books that I don't own. There are actually 17 books that I've chosen for this challenge that I don't have. So I'm gonna have to either buy them or borrow them. So this is a really worthwhile challenge, I think. And maybe if I go through my list, this video will be of some help to you. So I'm just gonna go through it pretty quickly. I don't even know very much about what some of these are about, but I just wanted to sort of like publicly announce my involvement and what I was reading. So the first challenge says to read an epistolary novel or collection of letters. And ironically, I thought, oh, I mean, I guess I could count Dracula, but I read that, get it? Count Dracula? I suppose I could have counted that as my epistolary novel of the year, but I read that every year, and that, you know, seemed cheap and lazy to me. Also, it's a reread, and I didn't want to use rereads for this, so I actually ended up with Dracul by Bram Stoker and J.D. Barker, which is sort of a companion. It's new. It was new out last year, and it's like a companion sort of biography of Bram Stoker writing Dracula. And it is also told in that same format through a series of letters. And I've actually heard really good things about this, and I am obsessed with Dracula, so score. The next challenge is to read an alternate history novel. For this, I'm going to read The Wolf's Hour by Robert R. McCammon. This is a Nazi assassinating Hitler spy mission book where the protagonist is also a werewolf. The third challenge is to read a book by a woman and or author of color that won a literary award in 2018. And for this, I'm reading another book that I already have, thank goodness, Washington Black by Essie Adigian, and this book was, I think it was nominated for the National Book Award, but it won the Giller Prize. It's something that I've been looking forward to reading, and it's something that I own. The fourth challenge is to read a humor book, and I don't even know exactly what I'm going to read, but I am definitely going to read anything by Augustin Burroughs. I loved the first thing by him that I read this last Christmas so much that I'm going to read everything he wrote. I could also count Parker Posey's memoir. It's called a self-mythologizing memoir, You're on an Airplane by Parker Posey, and I'm sure it's very funny. So I could count that. The fifth challenge, these don't have numbers on them, so I might lose count. The next challenge, let's do that, is a book by a journalist or about journalism, and I'm going to read Chasing Hillary by Amy Chozick. And this was a journalist that spent many, many years on the road with Hillary Clinton, and it chronicles the entire campaign in 2016. And I picked this up once, and I read a sample of it, thinking this sounds great, and I was so stressed within pages that I had to put it down because I just couldn't handle it, and I've decided that it's time. I'm going to read this book because I want to, and I'm going to just be strong and like look at it as some history and as a really interesting view into what a presidential campaign is like. So I'm going to read that. I'm going to get through it somehow. I'm going to gird my loins and read that tale. Things that happened. The next challenge says to read a book by an author of color set in or about space, and for this I'm going to read the first book in the Lilith's Brood trilogy called Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. For the next challenge, an Own Voices book set in Mexico or Central America, I'm already about to read The House of Broken Angels, and what I'm going to read for this, because it needs to be set in Mexico, and I think that book only has parts of it in Mexico, I'm going to read The Hummingbird's Daughter by Luis Alberto Urrea. The next says an Own Voices book set in Oceania. I had to look up what Oceania was. Now, you guys, I'm not well-traveled, so I didn't know. And apparently it's the area that includes Australia and lots of the islands down in that area, like the South Pacific. So for this, I'm going to read a book called We Are the Ocean by Apeli Hau'ofa. The blurb on this publisher's website says, We Are the Ocean is a collection of essays, fiction, and poetry by Apeli Hau'ofa, whose writing over the past 3 decades has consistently challenged prevailing notions about Oceania and prescriptions for its development. He highlights major problems confronted by the region and suggests alternative perspectives and ways in which its people might reorganize to relate effectively to the changing world. So that sounds really fascinating. It's also got a gorgeous cover. Look at this. So then the next challenge says a book published prior to January 1st, 2019 with fewer than 100 reviews on Goodreads. So Goodreads, luckily there was like a group for this, and I just went down the list and I found a collection of long-form journalism by David Remnick. These are basically profiles of celebrities and public figures, and it's called The Devil Problem and Other True Stories by David Remnick, who is the editor-in-chief for The New Yorker. Profiles of people like Michael Jordan, Mario Cuomo, Donna Rice, Gary Hart. Less than 100 reviews, and all of the reviews say something like, wow, this should have more reviews. 78 ratings and 10 reviews. And I don't remember if this said ratings or reviews. I probably made this harder than it needed to be. It probably says reviews. Reviews, yeah. Well, this has less than 100 ratings, so that's what I was actually looking at. So I guess I'm like extra awesome. But that sounds great. I need more nonfiction in my life. The next challenge says a translated book written and or translated by a woman. So I have 2 options for this. One is to read the new translation of Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which was translated by a woman named Christine Denauer, which is translated with a new title called The Wretched, which I think automatically sort of demonstrates that she was willing to look at this with a fresh eye. I also really enjoyed the language in her translation, which is why I eventually chose to purchase it like a year ago, and I have still not read it. And then the other option that I have is The History of Bees by Maja Lunde. This novel was originally published in Norwegian because the author is Norwegian, and she translated it into English herself. This novel is also the recipient of the 2015 Norwegian Booksellers Prize. It follows 3 generations of beekeepers, one in England in 1852, another one in the United States in 2007, and another person in China in 2098, after all the bees in the entire world have gone extinct. So I'll read one of those 2, and I will probably read both of them, but I will definitely read one of them. The next challenge is to read a book of manga. I'm going to read Attack on Titan, Volume 1, and possibly Volumes 2, 3, 4, who knows. I enjoyed this anime so much, and I forgot that this came from a manga, so that's like a no-brainer. And then the next challenge says to read a book in which an animal or inanimate object is a point of view character. Now, I just read this done really, really well in Heartbreaker by Claudia Day, but I can't reread that for this, so I'm going to actually read something else that I've always wanted to read that I always forget is a book, which is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim by Robert O'Brien. I grew up loving The Secret of Nim. It's one of the most beautiful non-Disney animated films of all time. I adore it, and I'm really looking forward to actually reading the book and seeing if it differs in any way, and just sort of enjoying the children's book illustrated glory of it all. The Secret of Nim, by the way, is the movie that's based on this, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, which is basically about a woman she's a rat. No, she's a mouse, and her child is sick, and they have to move because the farmer is going to plow, and it's going to destroy their home, and her youngest child is sick. The next challenge is to read a book by or about someone that identifies as neurodiverse. Now, neurodiversity is a way of thinking about people who would be termed by many people as being mentally ill or having a mental illness or condition, but do not necessarily need to be forced into the mold of thinking or functioning like everyone else does, but are perfectly fine being the way they are. This includes people on the entire spectrum of autism, people who are left-handed, people who are dyslexic, people who have synesthesia. There's any number of different mental conditions, I'll call them, including the range of schizophrenias, who are included under the umbrella of this term neurodiversity. And I had to look that up, full disclosure, to know what that was. But it's a very interesting topic, and I've chosen to read a book that I actually had in my TBR, which is The Curious Case of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Obviously, this is a very famous book that was turned into a play about an autistic young boy who discovers that his neighbor's dog goes missing, and he decides to embark on an investigation to find out what happened. The next challenge is to read a cozy mystery, and for this I'm going to read In a Cottage in a Wood by Cass Green. This is literally a woman who inherits a cottage in the woods, and she goes to have a lovely getaway and find out what she inherited, and it's actually creepy and scary and bad things happen. And it was also super easy to choose because, I don't know, the title In a Cottage in a Wood basically should just be called A Cozy Mystery by Cass Green. The next challenge is to read a book of mythology or folklore. I have 3 options for this. Galatea, which is a short story retelling of the myth of Pygmalion, told from the perspective of the sculpture that the sculptor creates and falls in love with and then tries to control, and that's by Madeline Miller. And then the other mythological or folklore-based book by Madeline Miller that I have is actually The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and that tells the story of Achilles. And I don't actually know the Iliad. I have not read any Homer yet. The third book that I could potentially choose for this challenge is The King Must Die by Mary Renaud, which is a historical fiction novel telling sort of like a believable non-mythological novelization of the story of Theseus. The next challenge is to read an historical romance by an author of color, and this one stumped me for a little bit, but I found a novella by Courtney Milan called The Pursuit Of. And this tells the story of an American soldier in the Revolution, a black soldier in the Revolution, who is sort of left and has to make a journey on foot a long distance alongside the British soldier that he almost killed just before the Battle of Yorktown concluded. And while they're on their way to wherever they're going to go to, and I don't know that much about it, they fall in love. So this is a male-male romance set during the American Revolutionary War between the black American soldier and the British soldier. So it's an interracial, male-male historical romance, and that sounds pretty fantastic. The next challenge says to read a business book, and I'm going to read a book that I owned a long time ago, but now I can't find, so I guess I'm going to have to reacquire this somehow. I don't know. Maybe I left it at my parents' house, but I don't think so. And this is a book called How Starbucks Saved My Life by Michael Gill. And this is a memoir of a man who was very, very wealthy, and it was like a high-powered CEO, and then he got laid off and lost his job and had basically nothing and had to start at the bottom and picked up a job as a barista at Starbucks and then was cleaning the bathrooms and working his way up before he became the manager, and how sort of the humbling process of starting at the bottom of a huge company like that when he had been just like Mr. Big Shot actually sort of saved his soul and caused him to appreciate the world again and to appreciate what he had again, and it sort of like cleansed him and saved him in a way. It's not exactly like a business, like nonfiction, like advice book, but I do think that it would have very pertinent lessons for anybody who wants to go into business in terms of respecting your employees and what that experience is like for them, and knowing how to foster an environment of safety and appreciation and all of that kind of thing. And I don't know why I never read it. It was a gift for Christmas many years ago, and I always wanted to read it, and I never did, of course, and then I apparently lost it. So I'm going to have to buy it again or borrow it from someone, but that one should be inspiring. The next challenge says to read a novel by a trans or non-binary author, and I'm going to read a thriller called The Red Tree by Caitlin R. Kiernan, who is an author who wrote this book that I actually have been hearing about and wanted to read for a very long time. And I just never knew that she was trans, and she is. So perfect. I'm going to read The Red Tree because I think it sounds awesome. I don't remember what it's about, but it's a thriller. It has something to do with a house and a red tree. And it's going to be great. Yep. You know what? That's all you're getting. I need a drink. I knew this video was going to be a long one and take a long time to edit, but yikes. We're at 32 minutes, or at least I am. You're not, but I am. God, I hope you're not. All right, the next challenge says to read a book of nonviolent true crime, and I'm going to read Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. And this tells the story, it says the full inside story of the breathtaking rise and shocking collapse of Theranos, the multi-billion-dollar biotech startup, which apparently claimed to have developed a technology that made blood testing significantly faster and easier, but it was all vaporware and nothing was real. So that was like a big corporate fraud thing. And I've been hearing a lot about it from other people on BookTube saying that even if you're not super into nonfiction, this one is really a page turner. The next challenge, a book written in prison. And I have chosen a book that's going to be hard to get through, but I'm going to read The House of the Dead by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And this is a book that he wrote while he was in prison for disseminating apparently illegal literature. And he wrote this basically about the horrid conditions of being in a Serbian camp for like 4 years. Should be pretty horrifying and depressing and brilliantly written because I love Dostoevsky, and I'm going to be rereading Crime and Punishment this year, by the way. But that's not what this is about. House of the Dead by Dostoevsky. The next challenge is to read a comic by an LGBTQIA creator, and I'm going to read Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. She's obviously a very famous feminist, and she's a cartoonist, and I saw this musical about a year ago, and it was really amazing, and this basically tells the story of her growing up in a funeral home that her family ran. Yeah, and this is a graphic novel that, of course, she wrote and drew, and it looks really funny, and I know that I like this story, so I'm looking forward to it. The next challenge says to read a children's or middle grade book that is not YA, that has won a diversity award since 2009. And I'm choosing to read I Dissent, Ruth Bader Ginsburg Makes Her Mark by Debbie Levy. This is illustrated by Elizabeth Badley, and it is the recipient of so many awards, but like that's the list of awards. So 2016 National Jewish Book Award, the Sidney Taylor Book Award, the Orbis Pictus Award Honor Book for Outstanding Nonfiction for Children. It's won a lot of awards. And again, it's like nonfiction, so like look at me reading nonfiction. The second to last challenge, which would make it challenge number 23, is to read a self-published book, and I'm going to read a book that I did not know was self-published, and I guess this is kind of a cop-out, but I also always wanted to read this, and I didn't know it was self-published, so I think it's fair. I'm going to read Still Alice by Lisa Genova. This obviously is not self-published anymore. It is a big hit. It was made into a movie with Julianne Moore. And this tells a story of a very accomplished and intelligent woman who starts to develop Alzheimer's. And I definitely want to know more about this disease, and I am fascinated that this huge hit was self-published, and I really have wanted to read more about Alzheimer's disease, so I'm looking forward to this one. And the final challenge in the 2019 BookRiot #ReadHarder Reading Challenge is to read a collection of poetry published since 2014. And in researching this challenge, I discovered a poet who made me cry twice while reading samples on like the Goodreads website on my computer. And I was like, well, this is the one. And her name is Andrea Gibson, and she also goes by Andrew. Andrea Gibson, or Andrew Gibson, does not identify themselves with any specific pronoun. She says, quote, I don't necessarily identify within a gender binary. I've never in my life really felt like a woman, and I've certainly never felt like a man. I look at gender on a spectrum, and I feel somewhere on that spectrum that's not landing on either side of that. So she's very interesting, very trailblazing, brilliant person, and I keep saying she because her name is Andrea on the Goodreads thing, and her name is written as Andrea on all of her books. So I've read 2 poems by Andrea Gibson, one from the collection Take Me With You, and one from the collection Lord of the Butterflies. Both of them reduced me to tears because they were so beautiful. They deal with themes of having to come out and feeling different, and things that you would very closely identify with if you had to do those things. And as a gay man, they really resonated with me. Once again, reminding me that I need to be reading more LGBTQIA literature. I was reading these poems and crying and thinking, well, there goes that whole I don't really like poetry thing. Because I've always thought, I'm like, oh, poetry, like, I don't know, I don't really do that. but maybe I do. So we're going to find out, and I have a feeling that these might get read earlier on in the year rather than later, because I'm really anxious to sink my teeth into these beautiful, beautiful collections of words. They were so beautiful. I can't wait to read these and do a review and everything. And she has so many books, so it's going to be great. So those are the 24, and if you count the extras, like 26 or so books that I have chosen for my 2019 BookRiot #ReadHarder reading challenge. I'm super excited about all of these, and having actually gone through the list and chosen things, I feel more encouraged to believe that I'm actually going to be able to succeed in this challenge. And so what I'm going to do is prioritize all of these reads in my TBRs as the months progress through the year to be sure that I can get through this challenge before the year is out. And I'm really excited about seeing all of these different perspectives, as the creator Rachel Manuel said in her quote. So let me know if you are thinking of taking part in this challenge, or if I have inspired you to do so. I want to thank Rincey from Rincey Reads for bringing this to my attention. I had no idea this existed until I started following her. You should definitely check out her channel, which I will link in the description below. And I will also include a link to the article that lists all of these challenges on the BookRiot website in the description below. That is my TBR for this reading challenge. I'm super excited about it. And if you have any suggestions or any ideas, or would like to share with me what you're reading for your Read Harder reading challenge, please leave them in the comments below. And that's it for this video. So I really appreciate you being here with me for all of this book talk. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you love this video and you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel, and you can hit that bell icon to be sure that you're notified every time I post new videos. I'm posting videos now every Monday and Friday. And until next time, I will be here in the dark reading. Bye, guys.